Please, you have to come quickly. If you don't, she'll destroy her." The words burst out of Amara Bennett's trembling lips, her chest rising and falling as though she had sprinted miles. Her voice cracked on the last syllable, echoing through the dimly lit police station lobby. Officer Daniel Hayes, leaning against the counter with a stack of paperwork, lifted his weary green eyes from the forms. He had seen frightened citizens before, but the desperation in Amara's tone rooted him in place. She wasn't hysterical, she wasn't careless, she was deliberate, like a woman standing on the very edge of collapse, yet refusing to fall. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A ceiling fan spun sluggishly, failing to chase away the heavy summer heat pressing through the cracked windows. The whole station smelled faintly of coffee gone bitter and old varnish. "Miss Bennett?" Daniel said slowly, straightening. "Take a breath. What's happening? Who's going to be destroyed?" Amara gripped the counter until her knuckles paled. Her scarf, patterned with faded sunflowers, slipped slightly over her brow as beads of sweat rolled down her temple. "It's Lydia," she whispered, then louder. "Lydia Clark. She didn't do what they're saying, but Evelyn Whitmore, she's setting her up. You have to move now before they make it official." At the name Whitmore, Daniel's stomach dropped. The mayor's wife. He rubbed the back of his neck, caught between dread and duty. Evelyn Whitmore's name had the weight of a hammer in Crescent Hill. People feared her more than her husband. She was the unspoken authority, the woman who could reduce others with a flick of her tongue. And if Amara was right, Lydia, the quiet maid who had grown up in the same neighborhood as Amara, was her latest victim. Earlier that evening, just hours before Amara stormed into the station, the streets of Crescent Hill were painted gold with the dying light of sunset. Children rode rusted bicycles down cracked sidewalks. Porch swings creaked as old men nursed sweet tea. And in the shadow of all that peace stood the Whitmore estate, a towering house wrapped in white pillars and pride. Inside its walls, Evelyn Whitmore rehearsed her perfection like a well-worn script. She glided across the marble floor in her cream silk suit, her pearl necklace clinking softly. Her sharp cheekbones caught the chandelier's light, her icy eyes narrowing at Lydia, who stood hunched in the corner with a silver tray balanced in her hands. "You missed a spot," Evelyn snapped, pointing to an imaginary stain on the glass table. "Do you think guests won't notice? Or do you enjoy embarrassing me?" Lydia's hands quivered, but she forced her eyes downward. "Yes, ma'am. I'll fix it right away." Her voice was small, a moth's whisper against Evelyn's thunder. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She never was. She stepped closer, heels clicking like judgment. "And for heaven's sake, straighten your back. You slouch like a beggar, not a servant of this household." The humiliation cut deeper than any lash. Lydia obeyed, spine stiffening, but her soft brown eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Amara had been delivering fresh bread from the diner that evening, a weekly order for the Whitmore's dinner staff. She arrived just in time to see Lydia's quiet suffering. From the doorway, she caught Evelyn's sharp tone, saw the way Lydia shrank into herself like a caged bird. It took everything in Amara not to explode right then. She bit her lip, pressing the paper bag of bread so tightly that grease marks smudged the brown paper. Evelyn barely acknowledged her, dismissing her with a wave as if Amara were invisible. But in Lydia's trembling hands, in the way she avoided her eyes, Amara saw a cry for help. And when later she overheard the whispers among the staff that Evelyn planned to discover her diamond bracelet in Lydia's dresser before tomorrow's gala, Amara knew silence was no longer an option. Now, standing in the police station, she leaned closer to Daniel. Her voice was fierce, though her body shook. "If you wait until tomorrow, it'll be too late. She'll say Lydia stole from her, and people will believe it, because it's Evelyn. But I swear on my mother's grave, Lydia's innocent." Daniel's jaw tightened. He remembered Lydia, a girl with braids and a laugh that once carried across the churchyard. He remembered how she stopped laughing after going into service at the Whitmore house. But what Amara was asking, confronting Evelyn Whitmore, that was the kind of move that ended careers. He glanced toward the captain's office, the door half open, the shadow of authority lurking inside. Amara read his hesitation instantly. Her hazel brown eyes burned with defiance. "If you don't come, I'll go alone. And when the truth finally comes out, I'll make sure everyone knows the police stood by while Evelyn ruined another life." Her words struck like flint to stone. Daniel saw her mother in her face, Mrs. Bennet, gone too soon, but remembered for her fiery speeches at town meetings. Always speak the truth, no matter how heavy it feels. A long silence settled, the hum of the fan, the shuffle of papers, the weight of unspoken history. Finally Daniel exhaled, slow and resigned. He reached for his badge, sliding it firmly onto his chest. "All right," he said, voice steady though his hand trembled. "Show me." Amara's eyes glistened, relief tangled with fear. She nodded once. Together, they stepped out into the heavy night air, the cicadas singing like restless hearts. The Whitmore estate loomed in the distance, lit up for tomorrow's grand event. A storm brewed above the horizon, thunder rumbling low. Something was about to break. The Whitmore estate glowed like a lighthouse in the darkness, its windows blazing gold against the ink-blue night. Cars lined the curved drive, in preparation for the mayor's gala the following evening. Even now, staff scurried inside like shadows, polishing silverware, arranging flowers, scrubbing marble tiles that already gleamed. Amara and Officer Hayes stood at the edge of the property, just beyond the trimmed hedges that formed a barrier between the mansion and the rest of Crescent Hill. Daniel adjusted his collar, his nerves tight. "If we're going in, we need a reason. Evelyn doesn't take kindly to uninvited visitors." Amara crossed her arms. Her scarf caught the faint wind, fluttering like a flag. "You're the law. Isn't protecting people reason enough?" Daniel opened his mouth but closed it again, the truth too bitter to say aloud. The law in Crescent Hill bent easily beneath the weight of the Whitmore's wealth. Inside, Lydia Clark was finishing her last round of chores. Her body ached from hours of scrubbing, her fingers raw from bleach. She caught her reflection in the hall mirror, shoulders slumped, curls pressed flat against her damp forehead, uniform clinging with sweat. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself. A door creaked behind her. Evelyn Whitmore entered, every movement sharp and rehearsed, as though she were forever on stage. She carried a velvet jewelry box in her manicured hands. "Lydia," Evelyn said coolly, "come here." Lydia obeyed, heart thudding. Evelyn opened the box with a flourish. Nestled inside was a diamond bracelet, catching the chandelier light in a glittering snare. She lifted it, letting the stones sway in the air between them. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Evelyn's lips curled into a smile too precise to be kind. "Do you know what something like this costs?" Lydia shook her head, her voice caught in her throat. "More than you'll ever make in 10 years, Evelyn said, stepping closer, her perfume suffocating. She traced the bracelet along Lydia's arm before pulling it away. "Now, be a good girl and fetch fresh linens for the guest rooms. I'll finish here." There was something in her tone, a mocking sweetness, that made Lydia's stomach twist. She knew Evelyn too well, and when she returned to her small servant's room minutes later, she froze. The bracelet was sitting neatly on top of her folded blanket, gleaming like a trap. Her hands flew to her mouth. A sob threatened to break free, but she swallowed it. She couldn't move, couldn't think. Outside, Amara and Daniel approached the service entrance. The door swung open before they could knock. One of the younger staff members, Jamal, barely 17 with freckles across his dark cheeks, slipped out carrying trash. He stopped cold at the sight of them. "Amara?" Jamal whispered, startled. "Shh." She grabbed his wrist gently. "Where's Lydia?" Jamal's eyes darted nervously toward the mansion. "In her quarters, I think. But, Amara, don't stay long. Mrs. Whitmore's on a tear tonight. She's been—" He lowered his voice. "Planning something." Amara exchanged a glance with Daniel. She didn't need the boy's warning to know. Back upstairs, Evelyn's plan was already in motion. She entered Lydia's room without knocking, her expression twisted into feigned shock. "Oh my!" she gasped dramatically, eyes landing on the bracelet. "What is this?" Lydia stumbled forward. "No, Mrs. Whitmore, I didn't. Someone put it there." But Evelyn's voice rose in manufactured outrage, echoing through the halls. "Thief! How dare you steal from me after everything I've given you?" The commotion drew the staff. A handful gathered at the door, whispering, some with pity, others with fear. No one dared intervene. Lydia's chest heaved. She looked to them, her people, her witnesses. "You know me. You know I'd never—" Her words crumbled against the silence. Evelyn's hand flew across Lydia's cheek, a sharp, stinging crack. Gasps filled the hallway. Lydia staggered, pressing her palm to her burning skin. Ears welled, but she didn't let them fall. "Pack your things," Evelyn hissed. "By tomorrow, you'll be in jail where you belong." And then, Amara's voice cut through the corridor. "She doesn't belong in jail, you do." Heads whipped toward the staircase where Amara stood, Daniel just behind her. Her hazel eyes locked on Evelyn with a fire that made the air itself heavy. The crowd parted. Lydia blinked at the sight of her friend, disbelief and fragile hope colliding. Evelyn's face twisted in fury. "What on earth are you doing here?" Daniel stepped forward, his badge catching the chandelier's glow. "Investigating a complaint," he said evenly. His voice carried more courage than he felt. Evelyn laughed, cold, cutting. "A complaint? Against me? Don't be absurd." Amara strode into the room, standing between Lydia and Evelyn. She raised her chin, refusing to be silenced. "You planted it. I heard your staff whispering. You're trying to ruin her because you think no one will stand in your way." Gasps rippled again. The staff shifted uneasily, torn between loyalty and fear. Evelyn's icy eyes narrowed. "Careful, little girl. You're playing with fire." But Amara didn't flinch. Her mother's words echoed inside her chest. "Speak the truth, no matter how heavy it feels." And tonight, the truth was heavier than ever. The silence that followed Amara's accusation was suffocating. The air in Lydia's small quarters felt too thick to breathe, the walls pressing in as if they too were witnesses. Evelyn Whitmore stood perfectly still, her diamond bracelet now dangling casually in her hand. The icy smile on her face never reached her eyes. "Planted it?" she repeated, her voice velvet over steel. "That's quite an imagination you have, Amara. Perhaps waitressing has left you with too much idle time." Her words were a dagger coated in sugar. Some of the staff snickered nervously, not out of agreement but out of fear. Others kept their eyes glued to the floor. Amara felt every mocking glance, every whisper. But she also felt Lydia trembling behind her, the weight of years of humiliation etched into her friend's hunched posture. And that was enough to steel her spine. "She's innocent," Amara said firmly. Her voice didn't shake, even though her heart was pounding so loudly she thought it might crack her ribs. Daniel Hayes shifted uneasily at her side. He could feel Evelyn's gaze burning into him like frostbite. He had been silent too many times in his career, let injustices slide to protect himself. And here he was again, at a crossroads. Evelyn turned on him now. "Officer Hayes, isn't it? I'm surprised to see you stooping to this little charade. Surely you know the consequences of slandering the mayor's wife." Daniel opened his mouth, but Amara cut in before his nerves betrayed him. "What about Lydia's consequences?" she demanded, her voice sharp with conviction. "Do you care that your lies would strip her of her freedom, her dignity?" Evelyn's lips curved into something cruel. "Dignity? A maid has no dignity beyond the service she provides. And Lydia has failed even at that." Lydia flinched, the words striking harder than the slap had. Her eyes shimmered as she stared at the floor, shoulders curling inward like a wilted flower. Amara's throat tightened, but she refused to cry. Not here, not in front of Evelyn. She reached back, gently taking Lydia's hand. Her friend's fingers were ice cold. "Look at her," Amara whispered, forcing the others to hear. "You've crushed her for years, and you think no one notices because you smile at the church bake sales and cut ribbons at parades. But I see it. Everyone sees it. You're not strong, Evelyn. You're cruel." The staff murmured, shifting uneasily. Evelyn's mask flickered for the briefest moment, rage flashing across her pale features before she smoothed it away. "You've said enough," Evelyn snapped, her voice cutting through. "Ugh," the tension like glass. She raised the bracelet high, turning toward Daniel. "Arrest her. Do your job. Show this town that thieves and liars won't be tolerated." Every gaze swung to him. Daniel felt sweat bead at his temple. His badge felt heavier than ever on his chest, dragging him down. Evelyn's command was clear. Obey, or face ruin. His throat tightened. He thought of his late father, who had always told him, being a cop means more than following orders. It means protecting those who can't protect themselves. And he thought of all the nights he'd walked away, telling himself it wasn't worth the fight. Amara's eyes locked on his, fierce and unyielding. Lydia's eyes, in contrast, were desperate, pleading silently, "Don't let them take me." And Daniel knew with sickening clarity that if he obeyed Evelyn again, he would never forgive himself. He swallowed hard. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said slowly, voice trembling but audible. "With respect, I can't arrest someone without evidence." The staff gasped. Evelyn's nostrils flared. "The evidence is in her room," she spat, thrusting the bracelet forward. Daniel took a steadying breath. "It's not evidence if it was planted." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Lydia's eyes widened, a flicker of hope sparking in their depths. Amara felt her knees weaken, relief washing over her like cool water. But Evelyn's composure finally cracked. Her lips twisted, her face pale with fury. She stepped forward so quickly the pearls at her neck clattered. "You dare accuse me?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You insignificant little man, I could ruin you with a single phone call." Daniel didn't back away, his jaw clenched but his voice stayed steady. "Maybe, but at least I'll be able to look myself in the mirror." The entire room seemed to hold its breath. For the first time, Evelyn's power faltered. Not go. Nay, not yet, but shaken. She glanced at the staff, expecting their silence, their obedience, but this time, some of them were watching her differently. Doubt flickered in their eyes. And Amara knew the tide was beginning to turn. The storm outside had finally broken. Rain lashed against the tall windows of the Whitmore estate, each drop a drumbeat echoing the chaos brewing inside. Evelyn stood in the center of the servants' quarters, diamond bracelet still clutched in her hand like a weapon. Her cream silk suit, immaculate moments before, now looked too bright, too stark against the dark glares starting to ripple through the gathered staff. "You will all forget this nonsense," Evelyn declared, her voice sharp and commanding, straining to drown out the thunder. "This girl is nothing but a liar protecting a thief, and if you value your jobs, you'll remember who puts food on your tables." But the room didn't shrink this time. Instead, a fragile silence stretched. Lydia, trembling but upright, finally lifted her eyes from the floor. For the first time in years, she looked Evelyn directly in the face. Her voice shook, but it carried. "I am not a thief." The words rang louder than the storm. The staff shifted, murmurs rising. Jamal, the youngest, clenched his fists at his sides. "She's telling the truth," he blurted. I saw you earlier, Mrs. Whitmore. You had the bracelet before you sent her away." Evelyn's head snapped toward him, her eyes flashing like lightning. "You dare accuse me? You insignificant child?" But Jamal didn't back down. His freckles stood out against his flushed cheeks as he met her gaze. "I know what I saw." Amara felt her breath catch. The dam was breaking. One by one, the silent witnesses were finding their courage. Evelyn's mask cracked. Rage, pure and unfiltered, twisted her elegant features. She turned on Lydia, her voice shrill. "You ungrateful wretch! After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By conspiring against me?" Lydia flinched, but then, slowly, painfully, she straightened her spine. Tears traced lines down her cheeks, but her voice grew stronger. "You didn't do anything for me. You broke me down. You made me feel small every day. But not anymore." Gasps filled the room. Lydia's hand trembled in Amara's, but she didn't let go. She stood for the first time, not as a servant, but as a woman reclaiming her name. Evelyn's fury boiled over. She raised her hand as if to strike again. But Daniel Hayes stepped between them, his hand catching her wrist mid-air. The contact was electric, an officer finally daring to stop the untouchable. His voice was steady, louder than thunder. "That's enough!" The staff exhaled, as if shackles had loosened around their throats. Evelyn tried to yank free, her voice breaking into a near scream. "Do you know who I am? Do you understand what you're doing?" Daniel met her glare, his jaw clenched. "Yes, I know exactly who you are, and I know what I've allowed for too long." He released her wrist, but the mark of his defiance hung in the air like fire. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Rain battered the glass, wind howled through the cracks, and in the eye of that storm, Evelyn Whitmore stood exposed, no longer untouchable, no longer adored. And then, the final blow came not from Amara, not from Daniel, but from Lydia. She stepped forward, voice trembling but unbroken, and spoke so all could hear. "I will not bow to you again." The room erupted, staff murmured in support, some crying quietly, others nodding fiercely. The tide had turned completely. Evelyn's power collapsing under the weight of the truth. Evelyn's face crumpled, fury twisting into something raw. Fear. For the first time, her carefully polished mask slipped, and she looked not like a queen but like a woman cornered. She staggered back, her pearl necklace snapping as she fumbled for words. "Richard will hear of this, see," he whispered hoarsely, almost to herself. "He won't let this stand." But her threat felt hollow, swallowed by the storm and the eyes of those no longer afraid. The turning point had come. Evelyn Whitmore was no longer in control. The storm raged on, but inside the Whitmore estate the air felt strangely clear, like a veil had been torn away. The staff, once shadows against the grandeur of the house, now stood tall in the glow of the chandelier. Their whispers grew louder, no longer whispers at all. Always knew she was cruel. Never thought someone would finally say it out loud. "She slapped Lydia right in front of us." Evelyn heard every word, her face flushing red. She spun toward them, her hands trembling with rage. "Silence! You all work for me. Without me, you are nothing." But the spell was broken. Jamal, the boy with freckles, stood straighter. His voice, though cracking, rang clear. "We don't belong to you." A murmur of agreement rippled across the room. Lydia, still clutching Amara's hand, felt her knees weaken. For years she had endured Evelyn's cruelty in silence, believing no one would ever dare defy her, and now, before her very eyes, Evelyn's empire of fear was crumbling. Daniel Hayes shifted his stance, keeping his body between Evelyn and Lydia. He looked to the staff. "If anyone else has seen Mrs. Whitmore mistreat her employees, now's the time to speak. The truth matters more tonight than ever." For a heartbeat, hesitation lingered. The Whitmores had ruled Crescent Hill for decades. Speaking against them meant risking work, homes, reputations. But then, an older maid, Ruth, stepped forward. Her back was slightly bent from years of carrying burdens, her dark skin lined with wrinkles etched by time and toil. Her voice was calm but firm. "I've seen her do it before, accuse, humiliate, then toss people out like garbage. She did it to Clara 2 summers ago, claimed she stole silver cutlery. But it was Evelyn herself who set her up." The room buzzed louder. Another staff member, then another, shared their stories. Small cruelties, endless degradations, lies spun to cover Evelyn's malice. Each confession was a brick ripped from her pedestal. Evelyn staggered back as though struck, her hand tightening around the bracelet until her knuckles turned white. "Liars, all of you," she screamed, her voice raw. "You're ungrateful, every last one of you. I fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your heads, and this is how you repay me?" Her words fell flat. No one bowed their heads. No one begged forgiveness. Amara's voice rose above the storm of murmurs, calm, yet cutting. "You didn't feed them out of kindness. You fed them so they'd stay silent. But silence is done, Evelyn. Tonight, the truth is louder than you." The words hit harder than any slap. Evelyn's face twisted, her lips trembling, her eyes darting like a cornered animal searching for escape. At that moment, Mayor Richard Whitmore entered, drawn by the clamor. His tall figure filled the doorway, his tailored suit damp from the rain, his booming voice demanding, "What in God's name is happening here?" The staff parted, giving him a clear view of his wife, pearls broken around her neck, hair in disarray, clutching a bracelet like a weapon, while the maid she accused stood resolute beside her friend and a police officer. Richard's brows knitted. "Evelyn, what have you done?" For the first time, Evelyn faltered. Her words caught in her throat, her eyes wide, pleading. "Richard, they're lying. They're all against me. You know me. You know I wouldn't—" But the crowd around her was proof enough. Whispers turned to open declarations, a flood of voices rising together. Richard's face darkened, not in rage, but in something closer to shame. He looked at Lydia, at Amara, then at Daniel, who gave a single, steady nod. The mayor's voice dropped low, heavy with finality. "Evelyn, there are too many voices, too many truths. I can and protect you this time." The room exhaled as if a storm inside had broken. Evelyn's knees buckled. The bracelet slipped from her grasp and clattered onto the marble floor, its glitter nothing more than shattered glass in the silence that followed. The sound of the bracelet clattering against the marble floor echoed like a gavel striking wood, final, undeniable. Every eye in the room followed it as it spun once, twice, then came to rest at Lydia's feet. Lydia stared at it, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. For years, she had been forced to bow her head while Evelyn wielded her power like a whip. But now the symbol of that power lay on the ground, and the woman who had held it trembled in the center of her own empire. Mayor Richard Whitmore's face was pale, his carefully composed features sagging under the weight of shame. "Evelyn," he said again, softer this time. "What have you done?" Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came. Her voice, once sharp enough to cut glass, deserted her. She looked at Richard as if begging him to scoop her from the wreckage, but his eyes avoided hers. For the first time in their marriage, he didn't rush to shield her. The staff, emboldened, pressed forward. Ruth, the elder maid, spoke firmly. "We've all suffered her cruelty. Some of us lost homes because of her lies, some lost family. Tonight we will not be silent." Daniel Hayes took a deep breath and reached for his radio. His voice was calm, steady. "This is Officer Hayes. I'm calling in a report of evidence tampering and assault. Suspect, Evelyn Whitmore." The room gasped. To hear those words spoken aloud, suspect, was like a shattering of glass. Evelyn's knees buckled again. She clutched Richard's sleeve, her manicured nails digging into the fabric. "Richard, stop him," she whispered desperately, her voice breaking. "Please, I was only trying to teach her respect. You know I didn't mean—" Her words collapsed into sobs, the iron mask of the socialite stripped away. "Why?" She fell forward, sinking to her knees on the marble floor. Pearls scattered across the tiles around her like tears made solid. Lydia's eyes brimmed, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of release. She stepped closer, standing tall above the woman who had made her cower for so long. Her voice was gentle, yet it cut sharper than Evelyn's cruelty ever had. "You broke me every day. Made me believe I was worthless. But I am not. And tonight everyone sees you for who you truly are." Evelyn's sobs grew louder. Her hands trembled as she reached toward Richard. "You won't let them do this to me. You can't." But Richard closed his eyes, his voice heavy. "I can't help you anymore, Evelyn." The staff murmured prayers of relief. Jamal wiped at his eyes, his small shoulders finally relaxing. Amara wrapped an arm around Lydia, who leaned into her, shaking with both exhaustion and newfound strength. Daniel approached Evelyn slowly, the weight of justice in his steps. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said formally, "I have to ask you to stand." She looked up at him, mascara streaked down her face, her once commanding frame folded in on itself. For a long moment she didn't move. Then, with a broken sound, she obeyed. As Daniel read her rights in a voice that echoed through the mansion's grand halls, the storm outside began to quiet. The rain softened, as though the sky itself was exhaling. In that stillness, Crescent Hill witnessed something it had never seen before. The fall of Evelyn Whitmore. The sun rose slowly over Crescent Hill, painting the once untouchable Whitmore mansion in pale gold. The storm had passed, leaving behind damp streets, broken branches, and an air of renewal that seemed almost poetic. Outside the estate, news vans lined the driveway. Reporters whispered into microphones, their voices carried across the nation. Evelyn Whitmore, the mayor's wife, arrested last night on charges of evidence tampering, assault, and corruption. Inside, the house was quieter than anyone had ever known it to be.